Hey, welcome. Good afternoon. Georgia Fort here, independent journalist. So glad and thankful for those of you who have decided to join me this afternoon. As you know, I am grounded, headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where we have been the center of so much chaos for like the last year, pretty much. But things have calmed down a little bit. So I wanted to take this time to check in with you all and talk about some of the things that are happening politically and how Minnesota's trying to move forward after all that's happened. But first, before we get into that, Benjamin Dixon joins me now, a friend and colleague. I don't know if I should call you mogul or influencer or.
Just a brother trying to do the damn thing. That's all. I'm just out here. Georgia, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Definitely had to take like a few days to catch my breath because, man, it got crazy here. The third week in the trial after Dante Wright was killed by former Brooklyn Center police officer Kim Potter, there was a lot of protests. And so the community is still like kind of recovering from all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one of the reasons I like your work so much is because you really, you get in there. Like you are on the ground. You were there covering the George Floyd trial. The Derek Chauvin trial, the murderer of George Floyd. And then as soon as Dante Wright was killed, you were there immediately and doing both, double coverage. So shout out to you and salute to all the work that you're doing and all the good things that you've been doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's an honor hearing that from you. I hope you and your family are well, because I know you guys are out in Atlanta and there was some tornadoes and storms.
Yeah. It was pretty hectic, but the sun is out a little bit. So I probably after this go sit in the backyard and get a little bit of sun.
Nice.
But yeah, no, we're good. Thanks for asking.
And I do want to dive into some of the issues that we're still dealing with in regards to like those protests and even like the update with the Chauvin trial. But first, I know you guys heard about Trump today. The saga continues. Facebook's oversight board on Wednesday upheld the company's suspension of former U.S. President Donald Trump. Remember, he got blocked from like all of the social sites after the January 6th attacks. Yeah. Well, Facebook, because they didn't really want, Mark Zuckerberg didn't want to be responsible for making those decisions, created a board to oversee things like that and ultimately rule on it. Well, today they decided that he is going to remain in suspension for about another 6 months, but they didn't feel that ethically they could suspend him indefinitely. And so they've put the ball back into Mark Zuckerberg's court, and now he has about 6 months to figure it out. And this is really significant, Ben, because you think about all of the larger social sites, they're all looking at Facebook and being the leader. And how's Facebook going to deal with it legally? How are they going to justify it? Do you think like they have legal grounds to make this kind of executive decision?
I mean, they do, right? In their terms of service, if Facebook was true at every level of influencer with their rules and their terms of service, then Donald Trump would have been gone a long time ago. And right. The problem that they're facing right now is that they have been giving, or particularly Mark Zuckerberg, because I love the way he's trying to pointing this off to this oversight committee that he put together, when in reality, he was one of the people who inserted himself specifically with like Alex Jones, another right-wing conspiratorial voice that was really prominent on Facebook. And he actively made sure that those platforms weren't taken down. And so, can they do it? Yes. The thing is, are they willing to treat Donald Trump the same way they would treat Joe Schmo, who has a platform and says something offensive?
Well, I know that they've been treating Joe Schmoes, I know, with like a whole lot of scrutiny, because I turn left and right and I know somebody who's in Facebook jail and there's no way to bail people out. So they just get locked out of their platforms. And so, it raises a larger question. Of course, when you look at what happened on January 6th and you have all of these pro-Trumpers who, they insurrected the Capitol, and
Yep.
you think about that. Now, for safety reasons, obviously it makes sense because he spearheaded something that caused the death of 5 people, including
Yeah.
law enforcement officers, right?
Yeah.
But when you start talking about the filtering that they're doing, and how in some ways it does infringe on our First Amendment right to free speech. It's kind of muddy water. So I could see why the board is like, look, CEO Mark Zuckerberg, you get paid to deal with these problems, and you got to figure it out because it's a slippery slope, and there's no precedent. There's
Right.
no precedent for the way that a social media site should really conduct itself in terms of filtering what people are saying and filtering their platform. And I could go in a whole nother direction with this conversation in terms of being a creator, publishing content that is pro-Black or that has a Black Lives Matter theme in it, anything with social issues.
Yes.
They crack down on it, and they what is it called, shadow ban you.
Yeah.
So you definitely don't want to see someone like Donald Trump have access to a platform where he can organize and mobilize people to do violent things. But then on the other hand, you don't want them filtering you so much that you can't express yourself.
Yeah, there's a balance, right? But here's the thing. So these corporations can do what they want to. They're private corporations, and as much as we're on those platforms, and it feels like the public square, right? Like Twitter, for example. Twitter feels like you could just go out and say whatever you want to because it's like the public square. Back in the olden days, you get a little stoop, you stand up, and you just start shouting at the top of your lungs. In reality, I mean, Twitter is just a corporation, and they have their rules, and so they're not entitled. Or we're not entitled to like First Amendment rights on private property, right? They get to set the terms of what we do on their private property. But the way they've implemented it is exactly like you said. Like I just got out of Facebook jail, and I have a major platform, right?
He was locked up.
I was locked up. I couldn't go live, so we had ways around that. Obviously,
Man, you should have told me. I would have sent you some commissary.
I was locked down. But it was. We get locked down for telling the truth.
Right.
And if we speak too boldly against white supremacy, for example, which is what I was doing when I got suspended just last month, if we speak too boldly against it, then they have no problems. Facebook, Twitter, they have no problems coming in and shutting our platforms down.
Yeah.
That said, there is a balancing act in terms of public opinion. While YouTube, YouTube is included in this conversation. YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter can technically do what they want to do because they're private companies. They still have to think about the people who use their platforms, because eventually people would get tired if they just started suppressing all speech.
Yeah, and I think Liu Kang had a great point. Conservatives never seem to mind the fact that we're expected to forfeit constitutional rights while we're at work because it's a private entity. How is Facebook any different? Thank you so much for that. I think, you raise a valid point, and we'll wrap this up here and move on to the next thing. But the last thing I'll say is just like, these entities are so reactionary. I said in a conversation over the weekend, performative allyship is exhausting.
Yeah.
And what I meant when I said that was just like, they're reacting to things. Facebook is reacting to what happened on January 6th. But the reality is, if they were really running their company, if they were really managing the filtering that they're doing, if they were thinking about the power that they had to filter Donald Trump the same way that they're filtering you and putting you in Facebook jail, if they would have thought about that ahead of January 6th, think about the 5 people whose lives would have been saved. And so you got to also think that as so many of these companies, they're being innovative and they're making money and having all of this success, but most people are not tapping into the power that they have to make society more equitable, more fair, more safe. And so, like, why weren't some of the hate speech comments that Trump made criticized? And why wasn't he in Facebook jail before January 6th? Like, it shouldn't take our whole capital to be intruded upon for Facebook to say, oh, I have some power and authority to like protect America. You know, like why is why it bothers me that they're so reactionary.
Yeah, but you gotta put one more factor into this, and this is where I on my channel I'll go full socialist, but I'll keep it balanced here, right? So it's the money. They make so much money off of Alex Jones. That's why Mark Zuckerberg. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe Mark Zuckerberg believes the same type of politics as Donald Trump and Alex Jones, which is why he inserts himself personally into those conversations.
Well,
but on the flip side of it, though, they're making billions. They are making so much money off of these reactionaries, and so internally they're trying to decide: do we shut these people down for the safety of humanity, or do we keep making this money? And of course, they want to keep making that money.
Facts. Yeah. It's all about the Benjamins.
Yeah.
Benjamin.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, quiet as it's kept, it is all about the money at the end of the day. And so honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump is not back. He'll be back on that platform because Mark Zuckerberg likes his politics, I believe. And Mark Zuckerberg definitely likes that money.
I'm just going to take a deep sigh because it just makes me think of like all the 70% of Republicans who still think that he's president, and it's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it.
The damage he's going to do when he gets back on that platform, that's terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and it's terrifying to think about Derek Chauvin getting another trial. I mean, let me just say, I covered this trial. I was like the only independent journalist who was allowed to go into the courtroom and cover this. And so I'll just let you guys know, I'm going to continue following the other trials of the other officers, as well as the trial for the officer who fatally shot Dante Wright. So make sure you guys follow. You can find links on my website, georgiafort.com, but I'll be doing more live coverage, on the ground coverage, and a lot of it is not picked up by mainstream media. So if you guys are interested in following these trials, make sure that you guys follow me on other platforms. But the trial, like, speaking of terrifying, like, could you imagine what's going to happen if the judge approves Derek Chauvin's attorney's request for a new trial? Like, knowing how upset and outraged this community has been, not just after George Floyd, but then Dalal Eid was killed 6 months later, less than a mile away from where George Floyd was killed. And a lot of people didn't even hear about that police killing. Right. Then you had Dante Wright 3 weeks into the trial. And to give context, like Philando Castile before that, and Justine Demont, and so many others, Jamar Clark, the list goes on and on and on. And so to think that, here for one moment, we had this brief victory of guilty, guilty, guilty. And then that might be taken away, and so it's not, I don't think it's surprising, especially to Black America, to see like the little bit of justice that we finally got unraveled. Right. But it's so disheartening to know that this system is designed in a way that this is even possible.
Yeah. When you were just going down that list, and it's so heartbreaking to have so many names that we either can recall, or because of everything that's so many lives, it's hard to even remember all the names. And just to hear you, because Philando Castile, I forgot that he was right in that same area. Yeah. And so it is really a statement to just how disposable Black lives are to police and all agencies across this country. It is so depressing that we have now a catalog of lives who have been snatched away, and still we're fighting these same fights. And they are really, these officers, these police unions, you've covered it, the police unions, the institutions, they are genuinely fighting to be able to continue doing business as usual when the list of names just keeps getting so long.
Yeah. And, to give some context, if you guys have not been following this, one of the jurors spoke out. He's done several interviews. He's a Black man. And after he revealed his identity, of course, the trolls, they did what trolls do. And they found a picture of him participating in a march in Washington where he was wearing a T-shirt that said, "Get your knee off our neck, Black Lives Matter." And
Mm.
so this is, we heard a lot of this during jury selection where they really went through and they asked the jurors what they felt about Black Lives Matter. And for the first time, I feel like America was able to have this conversation about, how it's been politicized. Black
Mm.
Lives Matter is not just so much a statement about humanity anymore. It's become political. And in addition to that, it's become, they say, the organization versus the movement.
Right.
Well, I support the movement, but not the organization.
Mm.
And so I'm curious to know from you, Ben, what are your thoughts on the way that Black Lives Matter has been positioned as like a political theme in all of this?
That's actually a really great way to analyze it, right? So Black Lives Matter has been positioned to be the boogeyman, right? And it is intentional because what conservatives and white supremacists, and not all conservatives are white supremacists, but that Venn diagram has a lot of overlap. But I digress. The thing that they need more than anything else is a boogeyman to make sure that their supporters never actually listen to what, for example, Black Lives Matter is saying. It's in the name, Black Lives Matter, but they can't handle that. And so they've made it to be like, they want to make anyone associated with Black Lives Matter automatically disqualified. And this is what they're doing with the gentleman who wore the T-shirt. He had a Black Lives Matter shirt on. And so they're trying to put it into the national discourse that if you're associated with Black Lives Matter, whether it be the actual organization or the movement that is trying to preserve Black lives, there's a lot of people who want you to be completely disqualified from being able to join these national conversations, or in this case, the gentleman serving on the jury.
And could you think about that, like being disqualified because you believe Black Lives Matter? Like nobody's being disqualified because they're a Republican,
right?
So it seems so unfair. And what's going to happen if Derek Chauvin gets a new trial and he's found not guilty?
I see this morning. Now you set me back there, because this morning I was like, even if he does have another trial, they'll find him guilty again, and I'm pretty confident about that. But just hearing the possibility that you just said that they could have another trial and he get found not guilty, well, yeah, America's not going to put up with that. There would be too much hell to pay if that happened.
But it's
a possibility.
It's a possibility. And that's what we're faced with. And that's the thing I think that is hard to communicate to people, is like how we continue to be re-traumatized. Like everybody was holding their breath. Nobody expected that it was going to be guilty on all verdict or on all charges, right? Nobody expected that the verdict would come back to be guilty on every charge. No one did.
Yeah.
No one did. And so the fact that we got that, and now this attorney is asking to get a new trial, it just feels like a slap in the face. Like we can't even have a moment. And I know like some of the stuff that happens here doesn't make it national, but so the day that the verdict came out, all guilty, Benjamin, let me tell you, the Minneapolis mayor did a press conference and he made an announcement that they were going to remove the barricades at George Floyd Square. And it was like such terrible timing. Like, bruh, we haven't even had 5 minutes to just, acknowledge what this moment means. And here you are like, okay, we're going to reopen George Floyd Square now. You guys got justice. Like, he needs a PR rep to like give him, and I feel like you could probably speak to this better because you really follow politics closely, but some of these political, influencers, people who are in politics, they really need someone who has the cultural competency to advise them. As much as everyone's trying to prioritize DEI, you guys need some cultural competency, because 5 minutes after the verdict comes out, you're going to reopen George Floyd Square. That's your response as the mayor of the city to an all guilty verdict. It's so disheartening.
To your main point that they absolutely are, there's a disconnect, right? And there's a level to which representation matters, and then there's a level to which representation can be used as a tool for further oppression. In this case, what we're talking about, absolutely, like they need that cultural competency that you're talking about, and they don't really have that, because you'll have an entire office, an entire political office that's all white or predominantly all men, for that matter, or no one from the LGBTQIA community, and then they wonder why they have to hire a PR person for a crisis, when if they had staff that actually reflected the community that they serve,
Right.
then they wouldn't have those disasters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of mayors, so George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. Dante Wright was killed in Brooklyn Center, which is maybe 15 to 20 minutes out. So they have two different mayors. And it's been interesting to see how these mayors have handled things differently. And so I had the chance to interview the Brooklyn Center mayor probably about 2 weeks after Dante Wright was killed. What I wanted to address with him was the concerns of residents. When you look at where the Brooklyn Center Police Department's located, it's actually in a very residential area. And so there's all of these apartment buildings surrounding it. The Brooklyn Center Police Department became the site of so many protests after Dante Wright was killed. Pretty much every single night, and they tried to put a curfew in. They brought in 3,000 National Guardsmen to try to, deter property damage or whatever. But they started using rubber bullets, which I actually was hit by, or I was hit with one. They used mace and they used tear gas. And so residents living in proximity to the police department said that their children suffered a lot of negative health impacts. Ben, have you heard anything about like tear gas and how it's being used? If it's legal to be used at all?
So, there's different types of tear gas, and the type that they're using, don't get me wrong, it is very detrimental. It's very bad. But what I do know is that it has not been outlawed, right? It's still legal. And I this conversation comes up a lot because, well, they're tear gassing us a lot. Every opportunity they get, they fill the streets with tear gas. And so within the realm of like the law, yeah, what they're using is legal, but it does have deleterious effects on people, and they have no regard for that, because they just want to crush the dissent.
And I've been trying to do research on this because everybody is always saying that it's Geneva doesn't allow you to use tear gas in war, but apparently like in the States, it isn't outlawed. And so, but they can pass it as a law, right? Once they know that it's going to be deployed. But in speaking to some of the residents who live nearby where those protests for Dante Wright were happening, they're saying that they've called the military, they've called the police department, they've called poison control. No one can really advise them what's in that tear gas, like what type of chemicals. And so I talked to the mayor about it in this exclusive interview. I want you guys to take a listen of what he had to say. Anything that you guys are doing to address the residual impacts of tear gas being used over and over and over again and then being exposed to it?
The use of tear gas has been just absolutely heartbreaking for me. Our city council outlawed it the very second day after Dante was shot. The next day, we outlawed the use of tear gas or rubber bullets. I heard some horrible stories about a young man who, he came to me and told me that he had to take his kids' mattresses and brace them against the glass to absorb the impact of the rubber bullets. People have said that there's still residue from the tear gas in the carpet, in the hallways and in their apartments, and the kids are still walking around with phlegm and mucus, and they're still being impacted by what's left. And so we're contracting with a company to go in and deep clean the carpets and to try and remove what's left of the tear gas. But there are a lot of families that have respiratory conditions like asthma and other respiratory illnesses that the tear gas just absolutely exacerbates and really puts them at a health risk. And so I believe that cleaning actually is supposed to be done today.
And I think that it's good, right? That they're providing resources for bio cleaning to be done.
Right.
But again, it's reactionary,
Right.
right? And so why were those chemicals deployed in the first place? It's like, okay, you're trying to disperse this crowd of protesters. I understand that. But the militarized approach that we've seen against people who are standing up for Black life, and contrasting that, even going back to what happened on January 6th, there was no tear gas. There was no military deployments,
Come on.
and so it's disheartening. It's disheartening to meet. I met two mothers, Ben, who have young children that having nosebleeds, who are waking up vomiting, all because they were trying to get these protesters to disperse.
Mm. So shout out to the mayor, because while it was reactionary, he did it like the second day.
Absolutely.
Which is, there's still other cities across this country that are tear gassing folks right now. Like, there's just, anytime that there's a protest, and then you hit on something else, Georgia, you hit on the fact that none of this was deployed in the January 6th terrorist attack on the Capitol, right? The capital of the United States of America. Can you imagine? I just like to contextualize for people, because a lot of people don't realize what America is. America, this is Pax Americana, right? We had Rome, the Roman Empire. Can you imagine people storming the capital of Rome, and the legions did nothing? They stood down. Caesar didn't do anything. Nobody came to defend the capital of Rome. Just contextualize, it would be absurd. And yet we see in January 6th, the National Guard was told to stand down. And what did you say? 3,000 National Guardsmen were sent to, was it Minneapolis or Brooklyn Center that you just said?
The Twin Cities area.
The entire area.
6 or 7 cities.
3,000 National Guardsmen were sent to the Twin Cities region. And how many did we see show up on January 6th? And that should show you the commitment that this country has to suppressing Black voices and Black dissent and Black protest, while supporting, giving way. You could go all the way to the Capitol of Rome. You could go all the way to the Senate Hall of Rome and tear that place down, because the United States of America is a white supremacist nation. So yeah, that just blows me away.
Yeah. And it always, I try to stay, neutral on these issues, but at the same time, it's like, facts are facts. Humanity is humanity. And going out there, being hit with tear gas, being maced, being hit with rubber bullets. The one thing that I observed that was very perplexing was the fact that, I think maybe the third or fourth night, they withdrew all of the state patrol and local law enforcement. And they had maybe a handful of guardsmen who were away from the fence and just standing near the building, the Brooklyn Center Police Department building. That night, there was no arrests. There was no injuries. And so in this role, I think when you're not up close on these protests, there's an assumption that these protesters are agitating the police, that they're inciting violence first. But when you contrast that with like the day that there's barely any law enforcement present and the protest remains peaceful, I think that's very telling.
Absolutely is. Last year, right? George Floyd, the protest that ensued after he was murdered, we saw that same phenomenon. In fact, we have it on video, particularly here in Atlanta, where all the protests and some buildings were burned, and everybody wants to know, like, why were the protesters like this? Well, there's a video that shows what sparked it all off, and it was a police officer assaulting a small woman with his bicycle. And that set it off, and it spread from there. And just like you saw in your region, like if you haven't had the chance to be on the ground in a protest, you would not know that what you just said, Georgia, was 100% true. The overwhelming majority of people who show up are there for peaceful protests. There may be a small percentage. I was in Philadelphia when the protests were there. They brought out the stormtroopers during the DNC protest of 2016. They brought out the stormtroopers. There were like maybe 5 people out of the thousands that were there who were actually interested in creating a confrontation, right? But there were like hundreds of police officers there ready to set it off and instigate it themselves. So you're absolutely right about that.
And what I found very interesting is, of course, the George Floyd story blew up after the 3rd precinct was set on fire. It went global, right? And the interesting thing was, not only was the 3rd precinct set on fire, but there were dozens of other buildings that were set on fire. Car part shops were targeted because they had so much flammables. And so this was national, if not international news.
Right.
But did you see the mugshots of the people who ended up being found responsible when they were able to finally pull surveillance footage and start tracking down the people who were causing the fires?
It escapes my mind right now.
Yeah, no, because it never went national.
Okay.
It never went national. They never did the follow-up, and they blamed it on BLM. They blamed it on Black Lives Matter, but they did run it locally. And so when we started seeing all these mugshots of young white boys from the suburbs,
And see, that's the thing. So what they have done, and when I say they, I'm talking about the media and like the powerful, they want to stifle these protests by making people afraid of the quote unquote violence, when at the core of it, like you said, the violence has always been started by police officers. I don't care. You could pull it. We can go and examine every protest. It was started by police officers. But here's the other thing. Y'all are killing us. Y'all are killing Black folks. So there's a lot of us who just don't care. Like if a building burns down, right, and we investigate it, it probably was somebody who was not affiliated with Black Lives Matter. But at the end of the day, we're not going to let that propaganda stop us from letting our voices be heard. So I am blown away. I did not know. Matter of fact, I guess I have to Google it, but you're right. Those mugshots never even saw.
It never went national. They just national news didn't pick it up. They moved on to another story. But it's so important to contextualize because BLM they took the rap for that. Everybody blamed it on, and that's why people are like, "Oh, I support the movement, but not the organization," because people don't really understand. They're not fully educated on what it all means, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that people have kind of like this bad taste in their mouth about folks who are, and even just standing up for humanity at the end of the day. You said something, Benjamin, that made me think about how simple this is too. Everything is cause and effect. And so why are there protests? Usually after someone's been killed. So what is the cause of that? That somebody has been killed. So stop killing people if you don't want the protests to happen.
Right. See, this is my thing. I'll be honest with you. Like I don't care about wealth and money and all that kind of stuff. Just talk to my wife. She's a little tired of me. But anyway, I digress. The point is if I ever got a bag, like a real bag, I probably would buy a city block. And every time they killed a Black person, I would have the people come and say, hey, burn this down, because I want the imagery to be seared in the minds of America that these buildings are not worth more than Black lives. They're not. They're just not.
Yeah, and we've heard that a lot here too, that they're protecting property over people. And man, we've done a lot. We've made a lot of progress, but we still have such a long way to go.
We do. We absolutely do.
Well, I want to thank you for spending some time with me this afternoon, and to all of those of you out there who have tuned in. We definitely appreciate it. You can follow Ben. Where's the easiest way for people to follow you?
Thank you. Well, first, can I take a second and talk? Hey, everybody, hit the subscribe button. Georgia Fort is over here doing the damn thing. And she's out in the street, in the field, doing the damn thing. And she's doing high quality work, high quality production, high quality audio. I mean, that interview with the mayor. Could I just be so bold? David, could you play that interview, just a portion of the interview with the mayor again? Because it was just the resolution was perfect. The sound was and the questions were pertinent. Just a couple seconds, because I want people to see why they need to subscribe to this channel.
I appreciate that. Of tear gas being used over and over and over again, and then being exposed to it.
The use of tear gas has been just absolutely heartbreaking.
Look at that rack focus in the background.
Come on,
that's good. That's good, David.
After Dante was.
Hey, listen, like not everybody's doing, no, very few. Ain't nobody doing it like that. There's very
Thank
few
you.
people, if any, doing it like that. So support her channel. I'm going to be supporting it as much as I can. And so don't follow me, follow Georgia. Don't subscribe to my channel.
Y'all need to follow
Subscribe
Benjamin too.
well,
You're just as dope.
we're squatting up.
That's why the
we've been talking
algorithm
about
brought us together.
we talked about that the other day. It's like the algorithm is bringing folks together who have like the desire and the passion and the skill set to come out here and change the game. And Georgia, you're definitely doing that.
I appreciate it. Well, you guys, we'll be back next week. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Take care, everyone.